What if the way you speak to yourself is quietly keeping your wounds alive? What if every time you say, "I'm not good enough, I should be stronger. Why am I still like this?" you are not motivating yourself at all? What if you are teaching your mind and body that you are never safe from your own judgment? Think about the voice that appears when nobody else is around. The voice after a mistake, the voice after rejection, the voice when you look in the mirror, the voice when you feel exhausted, the voice when you remember something painful. For many people, that voice is far harsher than anything they would ever say to someone they love. And then they wonder why healing feels so slow. You cannot create inner peace while constantly speaking to yourself as though you are the enemy. Healing does not begin with pretending everything is okay. It begins when you learn to tell yourself the truth without turning the truth into punishment. And that is what I want to explore with you today. Because the right words will not magically erase trauma, anxiety, grief, or emotional pain. But changing your inner dialogue can change the way you respond to those experiences. It can create space between feeling and reaction. It can reduce shame. It can help you recognize your needs. And it can teach you something many people never learned. You can be accountable without being cruel to yourself. The first sentence I want you to practice is, "I am going through something difficult." I am not the difficulty. Notice the difference. I am struggling is not the same as I am a failure. I feel anxious is not the same as I am broken. I made a mistake is not the same as I always ruin everything. Pain becomes heavier when you turn a moment into an identity. One difficult day becomes, "My life is a mess." One rejection becomes, "Nobody will ever love me." One mistake becomes, "I can never get anything right." But a human life is not one moment. You are always changing. Your emotions change, your circumstances change, your beliefs change, your relationships change. So be careful with permanent language. Instead of saying, "This is who I am," say, "This is what I am experiencing right now." That small change creates possibility. And possibility is important because healing requires you to believe that something can change. The second sentence is, "This feeling is real, but it is not necessarily the whole truth." This becomes especially important when you are anxious. Someone doesn't reply to your message. You feel tension in your body. Your mind immediately says, "They are upset. I did something wrong. They are leaving. Something terrible is happening." The feeling is real, but the interpretation may not be. That is where self-awareness matters. You can say, "My body is reacting. I feel afraid, but I don't know the whole story yet." That sentence gives you room to breathe. You can ask, "What do I actually know? What am I assuming? What am I imagining? What evidence do I have?" You are not dismissing the emotion. You are refusing to make the emotion your only source of truth. Fear can tell you that something feels threatening. It does not always tell you that you are actually in danger. Sadness can tell you that something mattered. It does not necessarily mean your future is hopeless. Anger can tell you that something feels wrong. It does not mean every action you take from anger will be wise. Feel first, pause, then choose. The third sentence is, "I do not have to solve everything today." So many people are exhausted because they are living psychologically in the future. You are worried about next month, next year, your relationship, your money, your career, your health, your family, your future. Your mind keeps saying, "Figure it out, fix it, decide now, know what happens next." But some answers only arrive through time. Some decisions need more information. Some wounds need space. Some relationships need honest conversations. You don't have to solve your entire life today. Ask, what is the next thing I can actually do? Maybe it is making one phone call. Maybe it is taking a walk. Maybe it is getting some sleep. Maybe it is saying no. Maybe it is asking for help. Maybe it is simply stopping for a moment. You do not need the whole staircase. You need the next step. And sometimes that is where healing becomes practical, not by changing your entire life overnight, by changing what you do with the next hour. The fourth sentence is, my needs matter too. This sentence is incredibly important if you have spent years caring for everyone else. You may know exactly when someone else is upset. You know how to help. You know how to make people comfortable. You know how to keep the peace. But ask yourself, do you know what you need? Do you know when you are tired? Do you know when you are angry? Do you know when you have had enough? Do you know what you actually want? Sometimes people become so skilled at adapting that they lose contact with themselves. They say yes automatically. They apologize automatically. They help automatically. They become available automatically. And eventually, they feel exhausted and resentful. Then they wonder, why am I so stressed? Sometimes the answer is simple. You have been saying yes, while something inside you has been saying no. So tell yourself, my needs matter too. I can care about someone and still be tired. I can love someone and still need space. I can support someone and still have limits. I can be generous without destroying myself. This is not selfishness, it is balance. The fifth sentence is, I am allowed to say no. For some people, this sentence creates guilt immediately. Maybe because saying no once meant conflict. Maybe being agreeable made you feel safe. Maybe you learned that good people were always available. So now, even when you are exhausted, you say yes. Even when you don't want to. Even when you don't have the capacity. And later, resentment builds. A boundary is not rejection. A boundary is information. It says, this is what I can do. This is what I cannot do. This is what works for me. You do not have to make everyone happy with your boundary before you are allowed to have one. And when guilt appears, ask, did I actually do something wrong? Or am I simply uncomfortable because I stopped pleasing someone? That question can change the way you understand guilt. Sometimes guilt is not a signal that you did something bad. Sometimes it is simply the feeling that appears when you break an old pattern. The sixth sentence is, I can disappoint someone without abandoning myself. This may be one of the hardest lessons in emotional healing, because many people learn to manage other people's feelings. Someone gets angry, you fix it. Someone becomes distant, you chase them. Someone is disappointed, you apologize immediately. But another person's emotion is not always your emergency. You can care without controlling. You can listen without rescuing. You can love someone without giving away your boundaries. Sometimes the healthiest sentence is, I understand that you are disappointed, and my decision is still the same. That is not cruelty. That is emotional maturity. You are learning that connection does not require self-abandonment. The seventh sentence is, I do not have to earn rest. Many people only allow themselves to rest after they have completely exhausted themselves. They say, when I finish everything, I'll relax. But everything is never finished. There is always another task, another message, another deadline, another problem. So, rest keeps getting postponed until your body forces you to stop. Rest is not a reward for being productive enough. Your body needs recovery because you are human. You can rest before collapse. You can pause before everything is completed. You can sit quietly without proving that you deserve it. And sometimes what you call laziness is actually exhaustion. Sometimes what you call lack of motivation is depletion. Listen before judging. The eighth sentence is, I can feel this without acting on it. This is emotional strength. You can feel anger without sending the message. You can feel fear without running. You can feel jealousy without acting destructively. You can feel anxiety without checking your phone repeatedly. You can feel sadness without deciding that your whole life is hopeless. A feeling can be real without becoming a command. So when emotion becomes intense, tell yourself, I can feel this. I do not have to act immediately. I can wait. Then breathe. Let the intensity come down. Because a decision made at the peak of emotion can create consequences that last far longer than the emotion itself. The pause is powerful. The pause gives you choice. And choice is where your freedom begins. The ninth sentence is, this pattern was learned. I can learn something different. Maybe you learned to people please. Maybe you learned to overwork. Maybe you learned to hide your feelings. Maybe you learned to expect rejection. Maybe you learned to handle everything alone. Maybe you learned that being useful was the safest way to feel loved. These patterns may have made sense at one point, but a strategy that helped you survive one chapter may not be necessary forever. So instead of saying, I am just like this, say, I learned to respond this way. Then ask, what could I practice instead? Maybe asking for help, maybe saying no, maybe tolerating uncertainty, maybe expressing anger in a healthy way, maybe resting, maybe telling someone the truth. This is how change begins. Not through shame, through awareness and practice. And if this message is speaking to something inside you, comment 777. Let 777 mean, I am choosing to stop speaking to myself like an enemy. I am willing to listen to myself. I am willing to heal without demanding perfection. I am willing to stay on my own side. The number itself is not magic. The meaning comes from what you choose to do afterward. Notice the next harsh thought. Pause. Change the language. The 10th sentence is, I am not behind. Comparison can quietly destroy your peace. Someone else is married. Someone else has more money. Someone else seems successful. Someone else has figured out what they want. And you think, I should be further ahead. But according to whose timeline? There is no universal schedule for becoming yourself. Some people change careers at 30, some at 50, some rebuild relationships after years of struggle. Some discover their purpose much later than they expected. Your timeline is not proof of your worth. So tell yourself, this is where I am. I can begin here. I do not have to hate my current life in order to create a better one. That is a healthier form of ambition. You can want more without believing you are worthless today. The 11th sentence is, I can begin again. You may be carrying mistakes from years ago, a relationship you regret, a decision you wish you could undo, time you feel you wasted, a career path that no longer fits, a version of yourself you don't recognize anymore. But your past is information. It is not a permanent identity. You can change. You can repair what can be repaired. You can apologize. You can learn. You can seek support. You can start over. Maybe not exactly where you imagined, but from where you are. Say, I cannot change what happened, but I can influence what happens next. That is a powerful sentence because it brings you back into the present. The 12th sentence is, I am allowed to heal slowly. Healing is not a competition. You may understand your patterns and still repeat them sometimes. You may leave a painful relationship and still miss the person. You may set a boundary and still feel guilty. You may feel better for weeks and then have a difficult day. That does not mean everything is lost. It means you are human. Healing is rarely a straight line. You do not have to be perfectly calm. You do not have to never get triggered. You do not have to become spiritually perfect. You simply need to keep becoming more aware, more honest, more compassionate, more capable of repairing when you fall back into old patterns. So tell yourself, I am allowed to learn at a human pace. I can try again tomorrow. The 13th sentence is, I do not have to turn my pain into a lesson immediately. Sometimes something is simply painful. You don't need to convince yourself that every painful experience was necessary. You don't need to call every loss a blessing. You don't have to force gratitude while you are grieving. Sometimes you can simply say, this hurt, this mattered, I need time. And later, when you are ready, you can decide what meaning you want to create from it. That is more honest than pretending everything happened for a reason. Healing does not require you to deny reality. It requires you to face reality without destroying yourself. And perhaps that is the most important thing to understand. Self-compassion is not pretending you did nothing wrong. It is saying, I can hold myself accountable without hating myself. You can admit, I made a mistake, I hurt someone, I need to repair this, and still say, I am worthy of growth. You do not need shame to become responsible. You need honesty, you need accountability, and you need enough compassion to keep moving. So tonight, try a simple practice. Write down 3 things you said to yourself today that were harsh. Maybe I am lazy, I always mess things up, I should be further ahead. Then ask, would I say this to someone I love? If not, rewrite it. I am exhausted. This situation didn't go well. I am on my own timeline. This is not about making excuses. It is about replacing exaggeration with accuracy. And accuracy is healing because it leaves room for action. Instead of, I can't handle anything, you say, I am overwhelmed. What can I reduce? Instead of, nobody cares about me, you say, I am lonely. I need meaningful connection. Instead of, something is wrong with me, you say, my system is under stress. What support do I need? Instead of, I will never change, you say, I haven't learned a different response yet. That last sentence is powerful because yet creates possibility. And perhaps that is what your inner voice needs most. Not constant praise, possibility. A reminder that the current moment does not have to become a permanent identity. Now there is one more thing you need to understand. Self-talk can help, but words alone cannot solve every problem. Sometimes the answer is a boundary. Sometimes it is rest. Sometimes it is a healthier environment. Sometimes it is a difficult conversation. Sometimes it is therapy. Sometimes it is medical care. Sometimes you need practical changes in your life, not just better thoughts. If you are deeply overwhelmed, struggling to function, or experiencing persistent mental or physical symptoms, getting qualified professional support is not a failure. It is part of taking yourself seriously. Your inner dialogue and your external life need to support each other. If you tell yourself, my needs matter, but continue living in an environment where your needs are constantly ignored, something practical may need to change. If you tell yourself, I am allowed to rest, but never stop working, the sentence needs to become an action. Healing becomes real when your behavior begins agreeing with your words. So begin small. One boundary, one honest conversation, one period of rest, one request for help. One moment where you pause instead of reacting. One time where you choose not to insult yourself after a mistake. That's enough for today. Because transformation does not require one giant breakthrough. It requires repeated moments of different behavior, and eventually your new response becomes more familiar. The harsh voice may still appear, but you no longer automatically believe it. You hear, you are not enough. And answer, I am struggling right now, but my worth is bigger than this moment. You hear, you always fail. And answer, I made a mistake. Let's learn from it. You hear, you should be further ahead. And answer, this is my chapter. You hear, you have to do everything alone. And answer, I am allowed to receive support. You hear, you need to fix everything now. And answer, I only need the next step. This is how you become emotionally safer for yourself. Not perfect, safer. A place where you can return after a difficult day. A place where mistakes can be repaired. A place where emotions can be felt. A place where rest is allowed. A place where you don't have to perform to deserve compassion. And perhaps the deepest sentence you can learn is this: I am on my own side, not against anyone, not above anyone, not beneath anyone, simply on your own side. Because life will hurt you sometimes. People will disappoint you. Plans will fail. You will make mistakes. You will have difficult days. You cannot control all of that. But you can choose whether your inner voice becomes another source of pain or becomes a source of steadiness. So when the difficult moments come, tell yourself, this is hard. I am here. I do not have to solve everything tonight. I can ask for help, I can take the next step, I can begin again, and when you don't know what else to say, simply say, I will not abandon myself. That is where healing begins. Not when you become perfect, not when your anxiety disappears completely, not when everyone understands you, not when life finally gives you everything you want. Healing begins when you stop becoming another person who hurts you, when you learn to listen before judging, to understand before attacking, to rest before collapsing, to pause before reacting, to ask for help before breaking, to tell yourself the truth without turning the truth into shame, and slowly the relationship changes. You become someone you can trust, someone who stays, someone who repairs, someone who tries again, someone who can say, I am still learning, I am still becoming, I am still worthy. And perhaps that is the real transformation. Not that life becomes easy, but that you stop making every difficult moment proof that something is wrong with you. You begin seeing pain as something you can move through. You begin seeing mistakes as something you can learn from. You begin seeing boundaries as an expression of self-respect. You begin seeing rest as part of being human. And you begin seeing yourself not as a problem to solve, but as a person to understand. So tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself, what did I need today? What did I feel today? How did I speak to myself when things went wrong? Then choose one sentence that you will carry into tomorrow. Maybe, my needs matter too. I don't have to solve everything today. I can disappoint someone without abandoning myself. I am allowed to rest. I am not behind. I can begin again. Or simply, I am on my own side. Repeat it, not as magic, as practice. Because the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are.